Welcome to Movie Recap. In today's video, we will be going through the 2008 action sci-fi thriller movie Death Race. Turn on subtitles and spoilers ahead. The American economy collapses in 2012, and as the unemployment rates increase, crime rate also spirals out of control. At its breaking point, the prison system is now run by private corporations for profit. Terminal Island Penitentiary streams cage fights, where prisoners battle to death. It becomes a sensation, but audiences are quickly bored. So the show transforms into Death Race, where prisoners race dangerously in specially modified cars fitted with weapons. In one of the cars, a masked inmate, Frankenstein, pursues the car ahead of him and fires bullets until the car ahead is defeated. He leads the race, but a prominent rival, Machine Gun Joe, is close behind and relentlessly fires at Frankenstein's car. Case, Frankenstein's navigator, tells to fire back, but all the car's weapons malfunction, making Frankenstein decide to release their tank's back armor. It hits Joe and gives Frankenstein a moment of reprieve, but their exposed tank is now vulnerable to attack. Case urges Frankenstein to drop back, but he's determined to reach the finish line, leaving Case with no choice but to eject from the car as Joe launches a missile. Frankenstein's tank explodes, sending him to the finish line before being completely engulfed by flames. Days later, an industrial factory worker, Jensen Ames, gets laid off when the steel mill closes. Jensen collects his last salary and, like the others, gets frustrated when they are not given enough money. SWAT trucks suddenly arrive and incite chaos, getting Jensen and other workers to be beaten up by the police. That evening, Jensen arrives home to his beautiful wife. He explains the situation, but his wife understands and they make out on the counter. The baby monitor then alerts that their daughter is awake, so Jensen checks on the baby and washes himself, unaware that an intruder has entered the house. When he goes down, he sees his wife lying on the floor, and he is swiftly maced and rendered unconscious. Then, before the intruder leaves, he makes a gun gesture at Jensen. Jensen later wakes up with a bloodied knife in his hand and his lifeless wife lying beside him. Unfortunately, he's arrested for his wife's death. 6 months later, Jensen is taken to the Terminal Island Penitentiary, where he is immediately beaten up on Ulrich's orders. He's then led to his cell while his warden, Clary Hennessy, watches from a distance. The next day, as the inmates are having breakfast, Jensen walks in and is recognized as a record-holder driver by 3 other inmates watching him from afar. Jensen's breakfast is interrupted when a bald man approaches and tries to intimidate him by spitting on his food. Joe witnesses the exchange, so he leaves with his friends. The bald man is soon followed by Pachenko, who insults Jensen by calling him names. Pachenko and his friends attempt to hit Jensen, but Jensen is quick on his feet, easily subduing the men until the cops break up the fight. Jensen is brought to see Hennessy, who takes an interest in him. After reviewing his driving record, Hennessy explains that unknown to everyone, the famous Frankenstein has died, and she requires someone with Jensen's skill to wear the mask, pretend to be him, and continue the show. Jensen hesitates to risk his life in the death race, so Hennessy leverages the fact that 5 wins earn the winner freedom. Frankenstein has already won 4, so Jensen only needs 1 more victory. Later on, Jensen is taken to the auto shop where he's introduced to Coach, Gunner, and Lists. As they're showing him around, Lists explains that each team has its own pit and that only a selected few will know that Jensen will be Frankenstein. Jensen wonders how they can be so sure, so Coach explains that Hennessy has complete authority over the prison. At the same time, Coach explains that the show lost audiences and profit since Frankenstein's last race, saying that it's why Hennessy needs Jensen. They arrive at a covered area where Hennessy has been working on a secret project. Then, Hennessy is taken to Frankenstein's car, a modified Mustang V8 Fastback. Lists begin to describe the modification, and Jensen surprises them when he recognizes some of the builds. Coach shows them the various offensive and defensive features that they've added to the car, including the rear armor they call the Tombstone. Jensen asks about the ammo, so Gunner says that they get it on race day to avoid prisoners using it against the authorities. Then, Coach adds that it doesn't matter anyway, since the facility is an island only accessible through a thin bridge that can easily be blocked when needed. Later on in the yard, Coach informs Jensen of the 3 stages of the race, where, in the first 2 stages, he must get rid of the other racers as much as he can. In the 3rd race, Jensen must reach the finish line first to win. Coach also explains that his navigator Case will be coming from a women's facility and will meet Jensen tomorrow. Gunner and List adds that only Joe prefers fellow inmates as navigators because he goes through them so fast that it makes the audience squeamish. They discuss the rest of the drivers, starting with a 14K, a triad member who has a body count of 7 men. Then there's Grim Reaper, a clinical psychopath with a body count of 18. The local chapter of the Brotherhood has Pachenko, who's got an undetermined body count. The best driver that they have is Travis Colt, an ex-NASCAR racer who got into alcohol and substances and sent people into the hospital. Moments later, Joe and his men come over to bully Jensen. Joe also leaves a message to declare that he means to get back at Frankenstein in the next race, believing the guy is only in recovery at the infirmary. Then Joe threatens to send Frankenstein to the morgue this time. When they leave, some inmates that have left to do work detail on the track return, and Jensen notices the GPS trackers on their wrists. He recalls seeing the same tracker worn by the intruder in their house. On the day of stage 1, Hennessy and Ulrich outfit Jensen with Frankenstein's clothes, ring, and mask. The prisoners chant in their cells as Frankenstein walks down the hall towards the outdoor track. Then, Coach cautions him not to talk to other drivers as Frankenstein never did. Meanwhile, the women's facility bus arrives with navigators, and Case is the last to descend, walking straight to Frankenstein's car. She introduces herself to Jensen and lets him know that she's in on the ruse. Coach tells Jensen that he can take off his mask inside the car, and when he removes it, Case comments that he's better looking than the last Frankenstein. In the control room, Hennessy starts the transmission, and is delighted that Frankenstein is getting 12 million hits even before the race officially begins. While preparing for the race, Jensen wonders what got Case in jail, and she admits it's because that she killed her cop husband. Then, the race begins, and while weapons aren't allowed in the first 3 laps, the racers already try to get each other to crash. Ulrich initially doubts Jensen's skills, but because of Case's expert navigation, they quickly get in the lead and surpass Joe in the first place. Joe singles out Jensen, managing to push them off the tracks and into a gravel-covered path. He even lets other races go ahead so that he can keep an eye on Jensen. However, Jensen manages to get back on the track and goes head-to-head with Joe. Coach warns not to let Joe tear them apart, so Case makes Jensen lose Joe and instructs him to turn into a shortcut. When they return to the track, Hennessy activates some sensors on the road that enables the car's weapons when one passes by them. Case explains that the sword sensor arms the main guns, while the shield triggers their defenses. With their weapons activated, the racer starts opening fire. Another sensor, called the Death Head, raises giant spikes from the road when activated. And the Grim Reaper causes the first casualty when he pushes a racer to be impaled on it. Joe activates his gun and opens fire on Grim, who retaliates by spraying oil, making Joe's car spin and fall behind with a dead engine. Then Grim attacks another car that releases spikes and causes his car to cairn and tip over. And 14K finishes him off with a missile. Grim survives the crash, but Joe runs him over. Jensen steals a shield sensor from Colt, but none of their defense weapons work. Joe continuously fires on Jensen, but Colt takes over and pursues Jensen, causing significant damage to the tombstone. Out of option, Jensen orders Case to unhook the napalm and eject it with her seat. When Colt's car is doused with a napalm, Case sets it on fire, and Colt is out of the race. Towards the last lap, Jensen passes behind Pachenko, who gives him the gun gesture the intruder did back in Jensen's home. Jensen is distracted and gets rammed off the track by Joe, making him finish last. Then, stage 1 finishes with only 6 remaining racers, and the beat-up vehicles get back to the shop to be prepared for the next day's race. Meanwhile, Gunner checks on the sprayers only to find out that they're working fine, realizing that Hennessy's the reason why he's in prison. Jensen tells her that he's no longer racing tomorrow. However, Hennessy shows him the photos of his daughter Piper with the foster dad. Unashamed, Hennessy guilts Jensen into playing the game so that he can get Piper back. In the yard, Coach talks to Jensen and explains that there's no longer a prisoner there. He qualified for a parole 3 years ago, but couldn't bear to go outside where the world had already changed without him. Coach tells him that he knows that Jensen is innocent, so Jensen reveals that Hennessy framed him for his wife's death so that she could use him in the race. That evening, Jensen follows Pachenko, meaning to take revenge, but he gets captured and beaten up. Pachenko takes a heavy wrench to hit him with, not caring if Hennessy is saving him for the race, but he gets interrupted when List stabs him with a pen. With Pachenko distracted, Jensen grabs a steel shard and stabs his captor in the leg, freeing himself. Now, off the chains, Jensen dodges Pachenko's attacks and proceeds to beat him up. Jensen almost kills him, but Ulrich appears and tasers them both. The following day, List, Coach, and Gunner find tall scaffoldings left in the workshop. Then, before the next stage of the race begins, Pachenko mocks Jensen with a gun gesture, but Jensen doesn't take the bait. Instead, he purposely drives slowly into a tunnel and asks Case if she's killed Frankenstein. To avoid being ejected from the car, Case admits to sabotaging Frankenstein on Hennessy's orders in exchange for her release papers. Frankenstein's death was an accident, as she only wanted him to lose so that Hennessy could continue using him in the races. Upon getting their confession, Jensen returns to the race, easily zipping through the others and sending Joe off the course. And then, Jensen pursues Pachenko and rams into him until he gets ahead, activating Sword instead of a shield. To the frustration of the Case and Coach, Jensen then turns the car around and drives in reverse so that he can fire directly at Pachenko. Case worries that Pachenko is too heavily armored to cause critical damage, but Jensen turns around again and orders the smoke to be released. With his visibility badly reduced, Pachenko crashes but survives to crawl out of the wreck. However, Jensen drives back, wears the mask, and gets out to finish Pachenko off. As Joe approaches, he attempts to shoot Jensen before he gets back in the car, but his weapons don't activate, so he kicks his navigator out of the car and switches into a new one. Meanwhile, Hennessy chooses that moment to reveal that project they've been hiding, a huge and overpowered vehicle called the Dreadnought. The massive truck catches up with the others and easily eliminates the two racers. Jensen asks Coach for any ideas to defeat the thing, but Coach says that Hennessy will eventually take it out once she's ramped up the ratings. Unexpectedly, Dreadnought enters a building and appears in front of the three remaining racers. It attacks with guns and flamethrowers, and the spike drills on its wheel latch onto the 14K's cars, killing his navigator. Then, it positions itself into front of 14K, hooks its car with chains, and finally finishes him off with a missile. With only the two of them left, Jensen patches through to Joe's communicator and convinces him to defeat the Dreadnought together. So the two endure to Dreadnought's attack and flank it to where the death head is positioned. When the time comes, both Joe and Jensen's car activates the sensor and makes the Dreadnought crash and explode. Naturally, Hennessy is furious, but Coach and the rest of the inmates can't help but enjoy the entertaining events. That evening, Joe talks to Jensen and brings up the similarities in his and Frankenstein's accents. He threatens to harm Jensen, supposedly to throw off Frankenstein in the next race, but he does nothing and leaves. Meanwhile, Hennessy orders Ulrich to eliminate Jensen, saying that they can find another person to be Frankenstein again. The next day, Hennessy gathers all the inmates in the yard for a pre-race speech, while Ulrich attaches a bomb under Jensen's car. However, Jensen knows that Hennessy is manipulating the races so that no one will ever win it and is break-free. Back at the workshop, Coach shows Jensen the footage of the place where Grimm crashed in the first stage. They share knowing looks, and then Jensen asks Gunner to add another half-gallon tank. He then goes over to Joe for a little talk. On the evening of the final race, Hennessy offers Jensen a new deal. She hands him his signed release papers and guilts him into staying and continuing to be Frankenstein once he wins. She claims Jensen is no longer fit to be a father of his daughter, as that he belongs on the track. Then, once Case and Jensen are inside the car, Case admits that Hennessy's order her to stop him once he's about to win, but Jensen is unruffled. Moments later, the race begins and Jensen immediately takes the lead. He passes by two sensors first, but Ulrich deactivates them, allowing only Joe to have his weapons working. Joe fires continuously at Jensen, and out of options, Jensen orders Case to release the tombstone. However, Joe dodges it, having learned his lesson from the race with the old Frankenstein. For For the next sensor, Hennessy allows Ulrich to activate a shield to keep the viewers interested, but Joe destroys the sensor before Jensen gets to it. Hennessy then orders Ulrich to prepare the bomb, just in case. On the track, Joe pursues Jensen and fires missiles towards his exposed tank. Jensen dodges, and the missiles hit the walls instead. The same one Coach showed Jensen in Grimm's video and creates a hole where Jensen and Joe easily pass through. Hennessy, Ulrich, and the rest of the guards in the control room panic as they have to watch two cars go off the track and head for the bridge. Hennessy orders to cut off the stream to prevent 70 million viewers from seeing the prisoners escape and sends police cars to chase them. Enraged, Hennessy pushes the detonator, expecting Jensen to explode, but Coach, List, and Gunner has already defused and taken the bomb off. Police cars chase Jensen and Joe on the bridge, and Case says that they cannot outrun them, so Jensen asks her to pull a lever that releases their fuel tank. The tank hits a police car and it explodes, effectively blocking the rest of their pursuers. Meanwhile, on the communicator, Coach bids Jensen goodbye. At the gates, men open fire, but Jensen and Joe's armored cars endure the attack, and that don't even hinder them. Once out, Joe and Jensen part ways, while Hennessy's choppers only pursue Jensen since he's the one that she's after. With the choppers on the trail, Case agrees to let Jensen go and continue driving in his place. Hennessy already gave Chase her release papers, so they have to let her out. Jensen jumps off the car and runs into the opposite direction as Case leads the choppers away. The choppers continue to rain bullets on Case until she gets cornered with explosives. Then, Case dons the Frankenstein costume and gets on top of the car, surrendering to the unwitting police. From a distance, Jensen watches as Case is being captured, and Joe appears, handing him a travel bag and ushering him to go. They ride a freight train and agree to meet in Miami, where Joe is headed, once Jensen gets his daughter back. Back in the control room, Ulrich informs Hennessy that Frankenstein has been retrieved, and their ratings were off the charts. Hennessy celebrates by opening a congratulatory gift, but inside, it is the bomb that they've put in Jensen's car earlier. Then Coach detonates the bomb and the two explode. 6 months pass and Joe and Jensen start over, working together as mechanics in Mexico. Seconds later, Case arrives in a race car, saying that she's got trouble processing her release paper. Then Jensen takes out Piper to meet her, and they check out Case's cool ride. Thanks for watching! Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new movie recaps.